The accusation came 3 weeks after the wedding. Murder, conspiracy, treason. Duke Rowan Ashford stood in the council hall with iron shackles waiting, his name dragged through blood and lies by enemies who'd spent years plotting his destruction. And beside him, unnoticed by everyone except the one man who mattered, stood Alara Vance, the woman no one expected, the wife they all dismissed. She wasn't supposed to matter, but she'd spent her entire life watching, learning, surviving in silence. Now she was done being invisible. This is the story of how the forgotten woman saved the untouchable Duke and rewrote the rules of power forever. Stay until the end, like this video. Comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The morning Alara Vance received the Duke's proposal, it was raining so hard the courtyard stones ran black with mud. She stood at the narrow window of her cousin's manor, one hand pressed against the cold glass, watching servants scatter like roaches beneath the downpour. Her reflection stared back, pale skin, dark hair pulled tight, eyes that never quite met anyone's gaze. 26 years old, unmarried, unwanted, a burden. You can't possibly be considering this. Alara didn't turn. Her cousin Marguerite's voice cut through the room like a blade wrapped in silk. I haven't decided anything yet. You haven't? Marguerite's laugh was sharp. Alara, the man is offering you a contract, not a courtship. Do you understand what that means? Alara's fingers curled against the glass. It means he's being honest. It means he's desperate. That word hung in the air between them. Desperate. It applied to both of them, didn't it? Duke Rowan Ashford needed a wife who could withstand pressure without cracking. Alara needed a reason to stop existing as furniture in someone else's home. She turned finally, meeting Marguerite's eyes. Her cousin was beautiful in that effortless way wealthy women often were. Golden hair, perfect posture, a smile that could disarm or destroy depending on her mood. Right now it was doing neither. She just looked annoyed. He's a frontier duke, Marguerite said slowly as if explaining to a child. His estate borders the Thornvale wilderness. His reputation is complicated. Complicated how? Marguerite hesitated. That alone told Alara everything. When Marguerite hesitated, it meant the truth was uglier than she wanted to admit. There are rumors, Marguerite said finally, about his first engagement. The woman died under strange circumstances. What circumstances? Does it matter? The point is, people talk. They've always talked about Rowan Ashford. And now he wants to marry you. A woman with no dowry, no connections, no value, Alara finished quietly. Marguerite's expression softened, but only slightly. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. The letter sat on the table between them. Cream parchment sealed with the Ashford crest, a wolf's head in black wax. Alara had read it 4 times already, memorizing every word. Miss Vance, I require a wife. Not for affection or status, but for partnership in managing a difficult estate under difficult circumstances. I have observed your conduct over the past year and believe you possess the qualities necessary for this role: discretion, intelligence, and resilience. This is not a romantic proposition. It is a strategic one. If you are interested, meet me at the Greymore Inn tomorrow at noon. R. Ashford. Marguerite picked up the letter again, shaking her head. He observed you? For a year? That's not romantic, Alara. That's disturbing. Or practical. You're making excuses for him already. Maybe she was, but practicality was something Alara understood. Romance was for women like Marguerite, women who had choices. Alara had survival. I'm meeting him, she said. Marguerite's jaw tightened. Fine. But when this blows up in your face, don't come crying to me. Alara almost laughed. When had she ever? Scent. The Greymore Inn smelled like wet wool and old tobacco. Alara arrived exactly at noon, shaking rain from her cloak as she stepped inside. The common room was half full, travelers, merchants, a few locals nursing ale in the corner. No one looked up. No one ever did. Except him. Duke Rowan Ashford sat alone at a table near the back, his posture rigid, his expression unreadable. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 32, 33, with dark hair starting to gray at the temples and a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. His clothes were expensive but practical, dark wool, no unnecessary decoration. He didn't look like a man trying to impress anyone. He looked tired. "Miss Vance." He stood as she approached, gesturing to the chair across from him. "Thank you for coming." She sat, folding her hands in her lap. "Your Grace." "Rowan," he corrected. "If we're going to do this, we might as well skip the formalities." "Do what, exactly?" His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "Get married. Or decide not to. Depends on the next hour." Elara blinked. Most men would have danced around the subject for weeks. Rowan Ashford apparently didn't waste time. "You said in your letter this was strategic," she said carefully. "What does that mean?" He leaned back, studying her. "It means I need someone who won't fall apart when things get ugly. And they will get ugly. My estate is in the Highlands, isolated, brutal winters, constant friction with neighboring lords. My steward is incompetent, my household staff is gossiping and divided, and I have enemies who would love nothing more than to see me fail." "Why?" "Because I inherited a title I wasn't supposed to have. My older brother was meant to be Duke. He died 5 years ago in a riding accident, and suddenly I was responsible for an estate I barely knew and a reputation I didn't earn." "The rumors," Elara said quietly. Rowan's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You've heard them." "Some." "And?" "I don't make decisions based on gossip." "Smart." He poured himself water from a clay pitcher, his movements precise. "The truth is simpler than the rumors. My brother's fiancée, Livia Thorne, died 3 months before their wedding. She fell from a balcony during a party at Ashford Hall. I wasn't even there. I was stationed on the southern border at the time, serving as a military officer. But her family needed someone to blame, and my brother was too grief-stricken to defend himself. So they blamed me instead." "Why you?" "Because I was convenient. The spare son, the one no one cared about." He met her gaze. "Sound familiar?" Alara's breath caught. He'd done his research too. "I know what it's like to be overlooked," Rowan continued. "To be treated as an afterthought. That's why I wrote to you. I don't need a wife who'll charm society or host elegant dinners. I need someone who understands what it means to survive when no one's watching." He pushed a folded document across the table. "This is a contract. Read it. Take your time. It outlines everything: financial arrangements, household responsibilities, expectations. If you agree, we'll marry within 2 weeks. If not, we part ways and never speak of this again." Elara picked up the contract, her hand steady even though her heart was racing. The terms were blunt, brutally clear. "Marriage is a partnership of necessity. Both parties will maintain separate chambers. Affection is not required. Fidelity is. The Duchess will manage household operations, represent the Duke at social functions when necessary, and maintain discretion in all matters." "You really don't believe in romance, do you?" she said. "I believe in honesty." Rowan's voice was flat. "Romance is a luxury. We don't have that kind of life." Elara read through the rest of the contract. Financial security, a private income, legal protections. Everything she'd never had. Everything she'd never expected to have. "Why me?" she asked finally. "You could marry anyone, someone with money, connections." "I don't need money. I need someone who won't betray me the moment things get difficult." He hesitated, then added, "I've watched you, Miss Vance. At dinners, at assemblies. You're always in the background, but you see everything. You listen. You adapt. Those are the skills I need." Elara set the contract down, her mind spinning. This was insane. Marrying a man she'd never spoken to, moving to a remote estate, becoming a duchess. But what was the alternative? Staying with Marguerite until she became too old to be useful, fading into nothing? "I have one condition," she said. Rowan raised an eyebrow. "Go on." "If I do this, if I marry you, I want real authority. Not just a title. I want to actually run the household, make decisions, fix what's broken." "Agreed." "And if your enemies come after you again, I won't be a decoration. I'll fight." Rowan studied her for a long moment, then for the first time he smiled. It wasn't warm exactly, but it was real. "Then we have a deal, Miss Vance," What? The wedding took place 2 weeks later in the chapel at Ashford Hall. It was smaller than Alara expected. Stone walls, narrow windows, a ceiling that seemed to swallow sound. There were no flowers, no music, just a handful of witnesses. Rowan's steward, a few household servants, and Marguerite, who'd come out of obligation and spent the entire ceremony looking like she'd swallowed something sour. Alara wore a simple gray dress. Rowan wore black. The vows were brief, efficient. By the time the officiant pronounced them married, Alara felt like she'd signed a business contract, not bound her life to someone else's. Maybe that was the point. The reception was held in the main hall, a cavernous room with dark wood paneling and ancestral portraits glaring down from the walls. Alara recognized none of the faces. This wasn't her history. It never would be. She stood near the edge of the room, watching guests filter in. Most were local gentry, minor lords, wealthy landowners, people who owed Rowan favors or hoped to curry favor themselves. They smiled politely, but their eyes were calculating. Duchess Ashford. Alara turned. A woman stood beside her, tall, elegant, with auburn hair pinned in elaborate curls, and a dress that probably cost more than Alara's entire wardrobe. "I don't believe we've met," the woman said, her smile bright and cold. "I'm Livia's sister, Celeste Thorne." Alara's stomach dropped. "Lady Thorne," she said carefully. "I'm sorry for your loss." Celeste's smile didn't waver. "Are you?" It's all right. You don't have to pretend." Celeste's gaze flicked across the room to where Rowan stood talking to his steward. "Tell me, Duchess, did he mention my sister when he proposed? Or did he conveniently leave that part out?" Alara's pulse hammered. "He told me what happened." "Did he tell you it was his fault?" "It was an accident." "Was it?" Celeste leaned closer, her voice dropping. Livia was terrified of heights. She would never have gone near that balcony willingly, but someone convinced her to. Someone who wanted her gone. That's a serious accusation. "It's the truth." Celeste straightened, her smile returning. "But don't worry, I'm sure you'll be fine. After all, you're not a threat to anyone, are you?" She walked away before Alara could respond. The room felt too hot suddenly, too crowded. Alara pressed a hand to her stomach, trying to steady herself. This was what Rowan had warned her about. Enemies, rumors, attacks disguised as polite conversation. But knowing it was coming didn't make it easier. "Alara." She looked up. Rowan stood in front of her, his expression unreadable. "Are you all right?" "Fine," she lied. He didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes, but he didn't push. "There's someone I need to introduce you to," he said. "The magistrate. He's important." Alara followed him across the room, her mind still reeling from Celeste's words. She barely registered the man Rowan was introducing her to, middle-aged, balding, with a nervous smile and clammy hands. "Duchess Ashford," the magistrate said, bowing slightly. "Congratulations on your marriage." "Thank you. I hope you'll find Ashford Hall to your liking. It's a unique estate." "I'm sure I will." The magistrate glanced at Rowan, then back at Alara. "If you'll forgive me for saying so, Your Grace, you've chosen an interesting time to marry. There's been some unpleasantness recently, questions about the late Miss Thorne's death." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Those questions were answered years ago." Of course, but you know how people talk, especially now with the new investigation." "What investigation?" Rowan's voice was sharp. The magistrate paled. I assumed you knew. Lord Thorne has petitioned the council to reopen the case. He claims new evidence has come to light." Alara felt the ground shift beneath her. Rowan's face went blank. Carefully blank. The kind of blank that meant he was one wrong word away from exploding. "When?" he asked quietly. "The petition was filed this morning." Rowan turned on his heel and walked out of the room. Alara stood frozen, her mind racing. An investigation. On their wedding day. This wasn't an attack, it was a declaration of war. Around her, the reception continued. Guests laughed, drank, pretended not to notice, but Alara noticed everything. She always had. Ibasid. She found Rowan in the study. standing at the window with his back to the door. "You shouldn't be here," he said without turning. "I'm your wife. Where else would I be? This isn't your problem." Alara closed the door behind her. "You hired me to manage problems, so let me manage this one." Rowan turned finally, his expression raw. "You don't understand what you're saying. If the council reopens this case, they'll tear my life apart. Every decision I've made, every relationship, every moment of the last 5 years, and you'll be caught in the middle of it." "I know." "Do you?" He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "They'll question you, interrogate you, try to turn you against me. They'll say I manipulated you, coerced you, that I'm using you as a shield." "Are you?" The question hung between them. Rowan exhaled slowly. "No." "Then we'll prove it." "How?" Alara met his gaze. "By finding out who's really behind this, and stopping them before they destroy us both." For a long moment, Rowan just stared at her. Then slowly, something shifted in his expression. Not hope, exactly, but something close. "You don't know what you're getting into," he said quietly. "Neither do you." He almost smiled at that. Almost. "All right," he said. "But if this falls apart, if it gets too dangerous, you leave, immediately. No arguments." Alara didn't answer, because they both knew she wasn't going anywhere. She'd spent her entire life being invisible. Now, she was going to use it. The investigation officially began 3 days later. Alara spent those days doing what she did best: watching, listening, learning. She wandered the halls of Ashford Hall like a ghost, noting every whispered conversation, every nervous glance, every servant who suddenly found reasons to avoid her. The household was divided. She could feel it. Some were loyal to Rowan, others were waiting to see which way the wind blew, and a few, she suspected, were actively working against him. On the 4th morning, she found a letter on her breakfast tray. No signature, no seal, just 4 words in careful script: "Ask about the balcony." Alara stared at it for a long time. Then she folded it carefully and slipped it into her pocket. Someone was trying to help her, or trap her. Either way, she needed to know which. The balcony where Livia Thorne had died was on the east wing of the manor, overlooking the cliffs. Alara stood at the edge, gripping the stone railing. The wind was brutal up here, cold enough to sting, strong enough to make her eyes water. Below, the rocks jutted out like broken teeth. A fall from here would be fatal, no question. "You shouldn't be out here." Alara turned. Rowan stood in the doorway, his expression grim. "I needed to see it," she said. "Why?" "Because if I'm going to defend you, I need to understand what happened." Rowan stepped onto the balcony, keeping his distance from the edge. "Livia fell during a party. There were at least 30 people inside. No one saw her go out here. By the time someone found her, it was too late." "Why was she out here at all?" "I don't know. She was afraid of heights. Everyone knew that." "So why come out here?" Rowan shook his head. "That's the question the Thorns keep asking, and the one I can't answer." Alara turned back to the view. Something about this didn't make sense. If Livia was terrified of heights, she wouldn't have wandered out here alone. Not during a party. Not in the dark. Unless someone convinced her to. Or forced her. "Who else was here that night?" Alara asked. "Everyone. My brother, the Thorns, half the local gentry." "Who benefited from her death?" Rowan went still. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that if this wasn't an accident, someone had a reason. Who stood to gain?" "No one. Livia's death destroyed my brother. He barely functioned for months afterward." "What about her family?" "They lost a daughter. Or they gained leverage." Alara met his gaze. "Think about it. Your brother was grieving, vulnerable. The Thorns could have used that, demanded concessions, money, land." Rowan's expression darkened. "You think they killed their own daughter for political advantage?" "I think people do terrible things when power is at stake." He didn't argue, because they both knew it was true. "I need to talk to the servants who were here that night," Alara said. "Anyone who saw anything unusual." "Most of them are gone. My brother dismissed half the staff after Livia died." Then I'll find the ones who stayed. Rowan studied her, his expression unreadable. You're serious about this? I told you I would fight. I didn't think you meant it literally. Alara smiled faintly. You don't know me very well yet, do you? No, Rowan admitted, but I'm starting to. She started with the housekeeper, a woman named Mrs. Brennan, who'd worked at Ashford Hall for 20 years. They met in the kitchens late at night after the rest of the staff had gone to bed. Mrs. Brennan was in her 50s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of posture that suggested she didn't take nonsense from anyone. You want to know about the night Miss Thorne died, Mrs. Brennan said. It wasn't a question. Yes. Mrs. Brennan poured them both tea, her movements deliberate. Why? Because someone's trying to destroy my husband, and I think that night is the key. The housekeeper studied her for a long moment, then she sighed. I liked Miss Thorne, she said quietly. She was kind. A bit fragile, maybe, but kind. She didn't deserve what happened. What did happen? I don't know, not exactly, but I know she was upset that night. I saw her arguing with someone in the corridor about an hour before she fell. Alara leaned forward. Who? I couldn't see, but I heard raised voices. Miss Thorne was crying. Man or woman? Woman. Alara's pulse quickened. Did you tell anyone? I told the magistrate. He said it didn't matter, that it was probably just party gossip. But you don't think so? Mrs. Brennan shook her head. Miss Thorne wasn't the type to cry over gossip. Whatever that argument was about, it scared her. Do you remember anything else? Anything unusual? The housekeeper hesitated. There was one thing. After they found her, I went to clean the balcony. There was broken glass out there, a wine glass shattered near the railing. Could she have dropped it? Maybe. But the strange thing was, there were two glasses, one broken, one still intact. Two glasses. Alara's mind raced. Livia hadn't been alone. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan, she said quietly. The housekeeper nodded. Be careful, Your Grace. Whoever did this, they're still here, and they won't take kindly to you digging up the past. Alara spent the next week combing through records, interviewing servants, piecing together fragments of that night. She learned that Celeste Thorne had been at the party, that she'd arrived late and left early, that she and Livia had argued publicly just days before. She learned that Lord Thorne had been gambling heavily around that time, that he'd owed significant debts, that Livia's marriage to Rowan's brother would have secured his financial future. She learned that the magistrate who'd overseen the original investigation had received a generous appointment to a higher court shortly after closing the case. Every piece of information led to more questions, and every question pointed to the same conclusion. Livia Thorne's death hadn't been an accident. It had been murder, and someone very powerful had covered it up. The council hearing was scheduled for the first week of spring. Alara sat beside Rowan in the audience chamber, her hands folded in her lap, her expression calm. Inside, her heart was pounding. This was it, the moment everything came together or fell apart. Lord Thorne sat across the room, flanked by lawyers and advisors. He looked older than Alara remembered, gray-faced, hollow-eyed, but his gaze was sharp. This council is convened to review the petition filed by Lord Thorne regarding the death of Livia Thorne, the magistrate announced. Lord Thorne, you may present your evidence. Thorne stood. 5 years ago, my daughter died under suspicious circumstances. The investigation was closed prematurely, and the man responsible, Duke Rowan Ashford, was allowed to walk free. I have new evidence that proves his involvement. He gestured to his lawyer, who produced a stack of documents. Letters, Thorne said, written by my daughter in the weeks before her death. In them she expresses fear. She says she's being threatened, and she names the man threatening her. The room went silent. Duke Rowan Ashford. Rowan didn't move, didn't speak. Alara's blood ran cold. The magistrate took the letters, scanning them quickly. His expression shifted. These are damning, he said slowly. They're fabricated, Rowan said, his voice flat. Can you prove that? Can he prove they're real? Thorne smiled. The handwriting has been verified by 3 independent experts. They confirm these letters were written by my daughter. Alara's mind raced. Handwriting could be forged, but 3 experts, that would take resources, planning. This wasn't just about revenge. It was a coordinated attack. The magistrate looked at Rowan. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" Rowan opened his mouth. "I do." Every head turned. Alara stood, her voice steady. "Your Grace," the magistrate said slowly, "this is highly irregular. So is accusing a duke of murder without evidence." Thorne's smile faded. "The letters are forgeries," Alara said calmly, "and I can prove it." She pulled a folder from her satchel and handed it to the magistrate. "These are records from the Ashford Hall Library. They show that Miss Thorne checked out 3 books on calligraphy in the month before her death. Why would she need to study handwriting if she wasn't planning to forge something?" Thorne's lawyer frowned. "That proves nothing. It proves she had the means, and when cross-referenced with the household ledgers, it shows she also purchased ink and parchment identical to what these letters are written on, from a shop in town, 3 days before she died." The magistrate's expression shifted. "How did you find this?" "I spent the last month reviewing every record, every receipt, every document related to that night, and I found something else." She pulled out another document. "This is a witness statement from Mrs. Brennan, the housekeeper. She saw Miss Thorne arguing with a woman the night she died. That woman was wearing a distinctive bracelet, a silver chain with a ruby pendant. I have a sketch." She handed it to the magistrate. "That bracelet," Alara said quietly, "belongs to Lady Celeste Thorne." The room erupted. Celeste shot to her feet. "This is absurd. I would never—" "You were there that night," Alara said. "You argued with your sister, and afterward she fell to her death. 2 wine glasses were found on the balcony, 1 broken, 1 intact. Why would there be 2 glasses if she was alone?" Thorne's face went white. The magistrate stood. "Lady Thorne, you will answer the Duchess's questions." Celeste's composure cracked. "She's lying. All of this. It's fabricated." "Then explain the glasses." Silence. Celeste looked at her father. Thorne looked at the floor, and Alara knew. She'd won. The hearing concluded 3 hours later. The magistrate ruled that the new evidence presented by Lord Thorne was insufficient and likely fraudulent. The original verdict stood. Livia Thorne's death was ruled an accident. But Alara knew the truth. So did Rowan. So did everyone in that room. Livia Thorne had been murdered. Not by Rowan. By her own sister. That night, Alara stood on the balcony where Livia had died. The wind was gentler now. The stars were out. "You didn't have to do that," Rowan said quietly, stepping beside her. "Yes, I did. You made enemies today, powerful ones. I know." Rowan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Thank you." Alara looked at him, really looked at him. For the first time, she saw past the Duke, the title, the armor he wore. She saw a man who'd been carrying the weight of a lie for 5 years. And now, finally, he could let it go. "We're partners," she said simply. "That's what you hired me for." Rowan smiled. It was small, but real. "I hired you to manage a household." "I'm overachieving." He laughed, an actual, genuine laugh. The sound startled them both, and for the first time since their wedding, the silence between them felt comfortable. Not warm, not yet, but something close. The victory should have brought relief. Instead, it brought war. 3 days after the hearing, Alara woke to find the household staff whispering in corners, their eyes darting toward her like she'd grown a second head. Mrs. Brennan intercepted her before breakfast, her face tight with worry. "Your Grace, you need to see this." She handed Alara a newspaper, the Highland Gazette. The headline screamed across the front page, "Duchess Ashford fabricates evidence. Council demands investigation." Alara's stomach dropped. "They're claiming you lied," Mrs. Brennan said quietly, "that the records you presented were falsified. Lord Thorne's lawyers are demanding a formal inquiry into your conduct." "That's impossible. Everything I showed was verified." "They don't care about verification. They care about destroying your credibility." Mrs. Brennan's voice was grim. And it's working. Half the staff is convinced you're lying to protect the Duke. The other half thinks you're insane for going after the Thorns in the first place. Alara read the article, her hands shaking. Every word was carefully constructed to paint her as desperate, manipulative, a nobody who'd fabricated evidence to protect her husband's reputation. They quoted unnamed sources who claimed she'd bribed witnesses, altered documents, and threatened staff members who refused to cooperate. It was all lies. But lies printed in newspapers had a way of becoming truth. "Where's Rowan?" Alara asked. "In the study. He's been there since dawn." Alara found him standing at his desk, surrounded by letters. His jaw was set, his knuckles white against the wood. "How bad is it?" she asked. He didn't look up. 3 nobles have formally withdrawn their support. 2 business contracts were canceled this morning, and the magistrate who presided over the hearing just issued a statement saying he's concerned about irregularities in the evidence presented. He approved everything I showed him. "I know." Rowan's voice was hollow. "But the Thorns got to him. They're pressuring him to recant his ruling." Alara moved closer. "Can he do that?" "If he claims the evidence was tainted, yes. He can order a retrial, and this time they'll make sure we lose." Rowan finally looked at her, his expression raw. "I told you this would get ugly." "You did?" "I told you to leave if it got too dangerous, and I told you I wasn't going anywhere." Rowan's hands curled into fists. "Alara, you don't understand what you're up against. The Thorns aren't just a noble family. They have connections everywhere. The council, the courts, the trade guilds. They can destroy us financially, socially, legally. And now they're targeting you specifically because you humiliated them in public." "Good." He blinked. "What?" "If they're targeting me, it means I hurt them, which means I was right." Alara picked up the newspaper, scanning it again. "Look at this. They're not denying what I found, they're just attacking my credibility. That's desperation. Or strategy. Same thing." She set the paper down. "They're trying to make me the villain because they can't defend Celeste, which means we need to go harder." Rowan stared at her. "You want to escalate. I want to win." "Alara, what's the alternative? Apologize? Retract everything? Let them rewrite history so Celeste walks free and you take the blame?" She stepped closer, her voice steady. "I didn't marry you to watch you surrender." For a long moment, Rowan just looked at her. Then something shifted in his expression, something that might have been hope. "What do you have in mind?" he asked quietly. Alara smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "I'm going to talk to Celeste Thorn." "Absolutely not. She's the weak link. She killed her sister and she knows I know it. If I can get her alone, away from her father's lawyers, she'll crack. Or she'll have you arrested for harassment. Only if she's smart enough to see it coming." Alara pulled her cloak from the chair, "which I don't think she is. Celeste is used to getting what she wants. She's arrogant, and arrogant people make mistakes." Rowan caught her arm. "This isn't a game." "I know. If you confront her and she files a complaint, the council will use it against us. They'll say you're unstable, obsessed. Then I won't get caught." "Alara!" She pulled free, her eyes hard. "You hired me to be your partner, so let me do my job." Rowan's jaw tightened, but he didn't stop her. He just watched as she walked out the door. Celeste Thorne lived in a townhouse near the city center. 3 stories of pale stone and black iron, with manicured gardens that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. Alara stood across the street, watching the house for signs of movement. 2 servants came and went. A delivery boy dropped off parcels. No sign of Celeste. She waited. Patience was something she'd learned young. When you were invisible, you got very good at waiting. An hour later, Celeste emerged, dressed in emerald silk and followed by a maid carrying shopping bags. She looked every inch the grieving sister, tragic, beautiful, untouchable. Alara followed at a distance. Celeste walked 3 blocks to a jeweler's shop, browsing for nearly 30 minutes before selecting a diamond bracelet that probably cost more than Alara's wedding dress. She paid without hesitation, laughing at something the shopkeeper said. Not the behavior of someone haunted by guilt. Celeste left the shop and turned down a narrow alley, a shortcut probably, between streets. Alara made her move. Lady Thorne. Celeste spun, her hand flying to her chest. Duchess Ashford. You startled me. Sorry, I was hoping we could talk. Celeste's expression cooled. I don't think that's appropriate. Probably not, but I'm doing it anyway. Alara stepped closer, keeping her voice conversational. I wanted to apologize. That caught Celeste off guard. Apologize? For the hearing. I know it must have been difficult for you, losing your sister, then having strangers dig through the details of her death. Alara's tone was sympathetic, almost kind. I can't imagine how painful that was. Celeste's eyes narrowed. What do you want? Just to understand. You and Livia were close, weren't you? Very. Then it must have been awful, watching her relationship with the Duke's brother fall apart. It didn't fall apart. They were in love. Were they? Alara tilted her head. Because Mrs. Brennan told me Livia was crying the night she died, that she was scared. And I keep wondering what could make someone so frightened they'd go out onto a balcony they were terrified of. Celeste's face went blank. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm just asking questions. Alara's voice stayed soft. Like, why were there 2 wine glasses on the balcony if Livia was alone? She wasn't alone. Exactly, Alara smiled. So who was with her? Celeste's hand tightened on her shopping bag. I have no idea. But you were at the party. You saw her that night. Briefly. Did you argue? No. That's strange. Because 3 different servants said they heard you fighting. Celeste's composure cracked just a little. They're lying. Why would they lie? Because you paid them to. I didn't. Alara stepped closer, her voice dropping. But someone's lying, and I think it's you. Celeste's face flushed. You have no proof of anything. All you have is speculation and gossip from servants who'd say anything for coin. Then why are you so angry? I'm not. You are. Because I'm right. You were on that balcony with Livia. You argued, and she fell. Alara's eyes locked onto Celeste's. Or maybe she was pushed. Celeste slapped her. The crack echoed through the alley. Alara's cheek stung, but she didn't move, didn't react. You're insane, Celeste hissed. Just like everyone says, a desperate nobody trying to protect a murderer. Rowan didn't kill anyone. How would you know? You barely know him. I know him better than you think, and I know you're lying. Alara's voice was calm. Cold. But here's the thing, Celeste. I don't need to prove you killed your sister. I just need to prove you're hiding something, and eventually people will start asking why. Celeste's hand trembled. Get away from me. Gladly, but this isn't over. Alara turned and walked away, her heart pounding. That had been reckless, stupid, exactly the kind of move Rowan had warned her against. But it had worked. Celeste was rattled, and rattled people made mistakes. The mistake came 2 days later. Alara was reviewing household accounts when Mrs. Brennan knocked on the study door, her face pale. Your Grace, there's a man here to see you. He says it's urgent. The man was in his 40s, thin and nervous, with ink-stained fingers and the hunched posture of someone who spent too much time over ledgers. My name is Thomas Wren, he said quietly. I'm a clerk for Lord Thorne's estate. Alara gestured to a chair. Sit. Wren sat, clutching a leather satchel to his chest. I shouldn't be here. If Lord Thorne finds out, he won't. You have my word. Wren hesitated, then pulled a bundle of papers from the satchel. These are financial records from the month before Miss Livia died. Alara took the papers, scanning them quickly. Debts, loans, interest payments. Lord Thorne was bankrupt, Wren said. He'd been gambling for years, borrowing against his estate. By the time Miss Livia got engaged, he owed nearly £50,000. Alara's breath caught. That's a fortune. Yes. Wren leaned forward. The only thing keeping his creditors at bay was the promise of Livia's marriage to the Duke's brother. The dowry would have covered his debts and secured his position. But then Livia died. Exactly. And Lord Thorne's creditors started circling. Wren pulled out another document. This is a payment record. 1 week after Livia's death, Lord Thorne received a lump sum of £30,000, enough to clear most of his debts. From who? Wren's voice dropped to a whisper. Lady Celeste. The room went silent. Where would Celeste get that kind of money? Elara asked. I don't know, but the payment came through a private account, not the family estate, and it was marked as a gift. Wren's hand shook. I think she paid him off, to keep quiet about what really happened on that balcony. Elara's mind raced. This was it, the proof she needed. Why are you telling me this? She asked. Wren looked at her, his eyes haunted. Because Miss Livia was kind to me. She treated me like a person, not a servant, and I think she deserves justice. You could lose your position, your livelihood. I know. Elara studied him. Then she stood and offered her hand. Thank you, Mr. Wren. This took courage. Wren shook her hand, his grip weak but sincere. What will you do with it? Win. God. Rowan was in the stables when Elara found him, brushing down his horse with mechanical precision. We need to talk, she said. He didn't look up. About? Celeste paid her father £30,000 after Livia died, to keep him quiet. Rowan's hand stilled. How do you know that? A clerk from the Thorne estate brought me the records. Why would he do that? Because he wants justice. Same as us. Rowan set down the brush, his expression unreadable. You confronted Celeste, didn't you? Yes. And? And she slapped me. Rowan's jaw tightened. Did she hurt you? No, but I hurt her. Elara pulled out the financial records. This is enough to reopen the investigation. If we present this to the council, they'll bury it. Why? Because half the council owes the Thornes favors. The other half is too afraid to cross them. Rowan took the papers, scanning them quickly. This is good evidence, Elara, but it's not enough. Not against a family with that much power. Then what do we do? Rowan was silent for a long moment. Then he said, We go public. What? If the council won't listen, we take it to the people. Publish the evidence. Let society decide. Elara stared at him. That's insane. The Thornes will sue you for libel. Let them. By the time the case goes to court, everyone will have already read the truth. Rowan, you wanted to escalate, he said quietly. So let's escalate. They met with a journalist named Margaret Hale 3 days later. Hale worked for the Highland Observer, a paper known for investigative reporting and very little fear of powerful families. She was in her 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, with a reputation for breaking stories that other journalists wouldn't touch. Let me get this straight, Hale said, leaning back in her chair. You're accusing Lady Celeste Thorne of murdering her own sister, and you want me to print it. We're not accusing her, Elara said carefully. We're presenting evidence and letting readers draw their own conclusions. That's still libel if you're wrong. We're not wrong. Hale studied them. Why me? Why not take this to the council? Because the council is compromised, Rowan said flatly. The Thornes have too much influence, but you don't answer to them. No, I answer to my editor. Who's going to need a damn good reason to run this story? Elara slid the financial records across the table. There's your reason. Hale read through them slowly, her expression shifting. When she looked up, her eyes were hard. This is explosive, she said, but it's also circumstantial. I need more. Like what? Witness testimony. Someone who saw something that night, someone credible. Mrs. Brennan is a servant. No offense, but her word won't carry weight against a noble family. Hale tapped the papers. I need someone with status, someone who was at that party and is willing to go on record. Elara's mind raced through the guest list. Most of the attendees were loyal to the Thornes, or too afraid to speak, but there was one person who might talk. Rowan, she said quietly. Your brother. He was there. He saw everything. Rowan went rigid. No. He's the only one who can corroborate. I said no. Why? Because he's barely functional, Elara. Livia's death destroyed him. I'm not dragging him into this. He's already in it, whether he wants to be or not. Rowan stood abruptly. This conversation is over. He walked out. Hale watched him go, then looked at Alara. That's a problem. I'll handle it. You sure about that? Alara wasn't sure of anything anymore, but she nodded anyway. Rowan's brother, Adrian, lived in the west wing of Ashford Hall, a set of rooms he rarely left. Alara had seen him exactly twice since the wedding. Both times he'd looked right through her, his eyes vacant, his posture slumped. He was only 34, but he looked 50. Grief had aged him in ways time never could. She knocked on his door. No answer. She knocked again. Adrian! It's Alara. I need to talk to you. Silence. She tried the handle. Unlocked. The room was dark, curtains drawn, the air thick with stale tobacco. Adrian sat in a chair by the window, staring at nothing. Adrian! He didn't move. Alara stepped inside, closing the door behind her. I know you don't want to be disturbed, but I need your help. Go away. I can't. Why not? Because the Thorns are trying to destroy Rowan, and I think you're the only person who can stop them. Adrian's head turned slightly. What are you talking about? Livia didn't fall, did she? His breath hitched. You were there, Alara said gently. You saw what happened, and you've been carrying it alone ever since. Adrian's hands curled into fists. You don't know anything. Then tell me. For a long moment, he just sat there. Then slowly, he spoke. Livia was scared that night. She'd been crying all week. She wouldn't tell me why, but I knew it had something to do with Celeste. His voice was hollow. They'd been fighting, about money, about the wedding. Celeste kept saying Livia was being selfish, that she was ruining the family. Did you see them on the balcony? Adrian's eyes closed. I saw Celeste go out there, and I saw Livia follow. I thought they were just talking, but then I heard shouting and glass breaking and... He stopped. And what? Alara pressed. Silence. Alara's chest tightened. Did you see what happened? No. By the time I got there, Livia was... His voice cracked. She was already gone. What about Celeste? She was standing at the railing, crying. She said Livia jumped, that she tried to stop her, but it was too late. Adrian's hands shook. And I believed her because I couldn't imagine, I couldn't even think that she'd killed her own sister. Adrian's head dropped. I should have known. I should have seen it. It's not your fault. Isn't it? I let Celeste lie. I let everyone believe it was an accident. I let Rowan take the blame. Then help me fix it. Alara crouched beside him. Come with me to the journalist. Tell her what you just told me. It's not too late. Adrian looked at her, his eyes red. They'll destroy me. They'll destroy Rowan if you don't. He flinched, but he didn't argue. Margaret Hale published the story 3 days later. The headline was simple. The death of Livia Thorne. New evidence suggests cover-up. Cover-up. The article laid out everything. The financial records, Adrian's testimony, the inconsistencies in the original investigation. It didn't accuse Celeste outright, but it didn't have to. The implication was clear. The response was immediate. Within hours, the story was being discussed in every tavern, every drawing room, every street corner in the Highlands. Nobles who'd once supported the Thorns began distancing themselves. Business partners quietly canceled contracts. The council was forced to issue a statement promising a thorough review. And Celeste Thorne disappeared. No one knew where she'd gone. Her townhouse was empty. Her servants claimed ignorance. Even Lord Thorne refused to comment. Alara should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt uneasy. This is too easy, she told Rowan. They were in the study, surrounded by letters. Some supportive, some threatening, all demanding answers. What do you mean? Rowan asked. Celeste ran. She didn't fight. She didn't deny anything. She just vanished, Alara paced. That's not the behavior of someone who's innocent, but it's also not the behavior of someone who's guilty. Then what is it? Strategy. Rowan frowned. You think she's planning something? I think she's regrouping, and when she comes back, it's going to be ugly. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Brennan entered, her face ashen. "Your Grace, there's a summons from the council." Rowan took the envelope, breaking the seal. His expression darkened as he read. "What is it?" Alara asked. Rowan looked up, his voice tight. "They're charging you with conspiracy to defraud the court." Alara's blood went cold. "What?" "The Thorns filed a formal complaint. They're claiming you fabricated evidence, coerced witnesses, and engaged in criminal harassment." Rowan's hands shook. "You're being summoned to stand trial." The room tilted. Alara gripped the edge of the desk, her mind racing. This was it. The counterattack. Celeste hadn't run. She'd set a trap, and Alara had walked right into it. "They can't do this." Rowan's voice cut through the silence, sharp and disbelieving. He was still holding the summons, his knuckles white against the paper. Alara forced herself to breathe. "Apparently they can. It's retaliation, pure and simple. The council will see exactly what the Thorns want them to see." Alara moved to the window, her mind already racing ahead. This was always the plan. Let me expose Celeste, then flip the narrative. Make me the criminal. We have evidence, which they'll claim I fabricated. That's the whole point of the charge. She turned to face him. They're not trying to prove I'm wrong. They're trying to prove I'm a liar. And once they do that, everything I found becomes worthless. Rowan set the summons down with deliberate care, like he was afraid he'd tear it to shreds otherwise. "When's the trial?" 6 days. 6 days to prepare a defense against charges that carried criminal penalties. 6 days before she'd be standing in front of the same council that had already shown it could be influenced, bought, or intimidated by the Thorns. Mrs. Brennan cleared her throat from the doorway. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but there's more." "More?" "The staff. Half of them are packing. They're leaving." Alara's stomach sank. "Why?" "Because they're scared. Word's already spreading that you're being charged. They think if they stay, they'll be called as witnesses, or worse, accused of helping you." Rowan's expression darkened. "Who's leaving?" "The groundskeeper, 2 of the kitchen maids, the stable boy." Mrs. Brennan's voice was tight. "And Thomas Wren sent word. He's been dismissed from Lord Thorne's service. He's fleeing to the coast before they can arrest him." The walls were closing in. Alara pressed her palms against the windowsill, her thoughts fragmenting. Thomas Wren had given her the financial records. If the Thorns convinced him to recant, or worse, if they made him disappear entirely, that evidence would be worthless. "We need a lawyer," Rowan said. "The best one we can find. The best ones won't touch this case, not against the Thorns." "Then we'll find someone who will." Alara shook her head slowly. "It's not about finding someone willing, it's about finding someone who can win." She turned to face him. "And I don't think a lawyer can do that." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying we're fighting the wrong battle. The Thorns don't care about facts or evidence. They care about control. And right now, they're controlling the narrative." Rowan's jaw tightened. "So what do we do?" Alara looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "We take it back, Mas." Margaret Hale's office was above a printing shop, reached by a narrow staircase that smelled like ink and tobacco. Alara climbed it alone. Rowan had wanted to come, but she'd insisted he stay at the hall. If this went wrong, she didn't want him implicated any further. Hale was at her desk, surrounded by papers and half-empty coffee cups. She looked up as Alara entered, her expression knowing. "Let me guess," Hale said. "They're coming after you. Criminal charges, fraud, coercion, harassment. That was fast." "They had it ready. They were just waiting for the right moment." Hale gestured to a chair. Alara sat. "What do you need from me?" Hale asked. "Another article." "About?" "Me. My background. Who I was before I married Rowan." Alara leaned forward. "The Thorns are going to paint me as a gold digger who fabricated evidence to secure her position. I need you to show people who I really am." Hale raised an eyebrow. "And who's that?" "Someone who had nothing to gain from lying. Someone who spent her entire life invisible because she wasn't important enough to notice." Alara's voice was steady. "I need you to tell the truth, that I didn't marry Rowan for money or status. I married him because he offered me a partnership, and when his enemies came after him, I fought back. That's a story, Hale said slowly. But it's also risky. You're putting your entire history on display. Every mistake, every vulnerability. The Thorns will use that against you. Let them. At least it'll be the truth. Hale studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled out a notebook. All right, tell me everything. So Alara did. She told Hale about growing up as a poor relation in her cousin's household, about being treated like a piece of furniture, useful when needed, invisible the rest of the time, about the years she'd spent watching other women marry and build lives while she remained trapped in someone else's home. She told Hale about the letter from Rowan, about the contract, about walking into a marriage with no illusions and no expectations beyond survival. And she told Hale about the moment she'd decided to stop being invisible. I knew what people would say, Alara said quietly, that I was nobody, that I had no right to challenge a family like the Thorns, but I also knew they were wrong about Rowan, and if I didn't fight for him, no one else would. Hale scribbled notes, her expression unreadable. When Alara finished, the journalist set down her pen. This is going to hurt, Hale said bluntly. People are going to read this and judge you. Some will sympathize. Others will say you're exactly what the Thorns claim, a desperate woman who overstepped. I know. And you're okay with that? Alara thought about it, then she nodded. I'd rather be judged for fighting than pitied for staying silent. Hale smiled, a rare, genuine expression. All right, I'll run it tomorrow. The article appeared the next morning. The Invisible Duchess, one woman's fight against power. Alara didn't read it. She couldn't. Instead, she spent the day preparing for the trial, going over every piece of evidence, every witness statement, every detail that could be twisted or questioned. Rowan found her in the library late that night, surrounded by papers. You need to sleep, he said. I need to be ready. He sat down across from her, his expression weary. Adrian's been asking about you. That surprised her. What does he want? To help. He's been sober for 3 days, first time in years. Rowan's voice was quiet. He says he's testifying at the trial, whether we want him to or not. That could make things worse for him. He knows, but he's doing it anyway. Rowan met her gaze. You changed something in him, Alara. I don't know what, but he's different. I just asked him to tell the truth. No. You made him believe the truth mattered. Rowan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. You do that to people. You make them want to be better. Alara's throat tightened. I'm just trying not to get us both destroyed. You're doing more than that. His grip tightened slightly. Whatever happens at that trial, whatever they throw at you, I'm with you, all the way. She wanted to believe him, but belief was a luxury she couldn't afford right now. We should go over your testimony again, she said, pulling her hand back. If they call you to the stand, Alara. What? Stop. His voice was gentle. Just for tonight. Stop preparing. Stop strategizing. Stop fighting. I can't. Why not? Because if I stop, I'll fall apart. The words hung between them. Rowan stood, moving around the table. He knelt beside her chair, his eyes level with hers. Then fall apart, he said quietly. I'll catch you. And for the first time since the summons arrived, Alara let herself cry. The trial convened in the council chamber at dawn. The room was packed. Nobles, journalists, curious onlookers who'd come to watch the spectacle. Alara sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded, her expression calm. Beside her sat their lawyer, a younger man named James Holloway, who'd agreed to take the case because, in his words, someone needs to tell the Thorns to go to hell. Across the aisle sat Lord Thorn and his legal team, 5 lawyers, all stone-faced and impeccably dressed. Celeste wasn't there. According to rumors, she'd retreated to a country estate claiming illness. Convenient. The magistrate entered, a different one this time, a severe-looking woman named Magistrate Aldrich. She banged her gavel once. This court is convened to hear charges against Duchess Alara Ashford. The charges are conspiracy to defraud the court, witness coercion, and criminal harassment. How does the defendant plead? Alara stood. Not guilty. Aldrich nodded. The prosecution may present its opening statement. Lord Thorne's lead attorney, a man named Vincent Cross, rose. He was in his 50s, silver-haired, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never losing. Your Honor, this case is straightforward, Cross began. The defendant, in an attempt to protect her husband from legitimate scrutiny, engaged in a campaign of lies and manipulation. She fabricated financial records, she coerced witnesses into giving false testimony, and when confronted with her deceptions, she harassed members of a grieving family. He gestured to a stack of documents on his table. We will prove that the so-called evidence presented by the Duchess was altered, that her witnesses were paid or threatened, and that her actions constitute a criminal conspiracy. Cross sat down. Magistrate Aldrich looked at Holloway. Defense? Holloway stood, adjusting his coat. He looked young and nervous compared to Cross. But when he spoke, his voice was steady. Your Honor, the prosecution would have you believe that Duchess Ashford is a criminal mastermind who orchestrated an elaborate fraud. The truth is simpler. She's a woman who asked questions no one else was willing to ask. And because those questions threaten powerful people, she's being punished. He paused, letting the words settle. We will show that every piece of evidence she presented was genuine, that every witness she spoke to told the truth voluntarily, and that the real conspiracy is the one being perpetrated by the prosecution, to silence anyone who dares challenge their version of events. Magistrate Aldrich's expression didn't change. Proceed with your first witness, Mr. Cross. Cross called Thomas Wren. Alara's stomach dropped. Wren was supposed to be gone, fled to the coast, but here he was, walking to the stand with his head down, refusing to meet her gaze. Mr. Wren, Cross said smoothly, you were employed by Lord Thorne as a clerk, correct? Yes. And you provided financial records to Duchess Ashford? Yes. Did she pay you for those records? Wren hesitated. Yes, the courtroom murmured. Alara's hands clenched under the table. That was a lie. She'd never paid Wren anything. How much? Cross asked. £500. More murmurs. That was a fortune for a clerk. And did she tell you what to say if anyone asked about the records? She told me to say they were genuine. But were they? Wren looked at the floor. I don't know. She gave me altered copies. I never saw the originals. Alara's vision blurred. He was lying. Every word was a lie. Holloway shot to his feet. Objection! The witness is fabricating testimony. On what grounds? Aldrich asked. On the grounds that there's no evidence of payment, no proof of altered records, and no corroboration of this story. Cross smiled. I have bank statements showing a deposit of £500 into Mr. Wren's account the day after he met with the Duchess. He handed them to the magistrate. Alara's breath stopped. That was impossible. She'd never... But then she understood. The Thornes had planted the evidence. They'd created the paper trail, paid Wren to lie, and now they were using it to destroy her credibility. Magistrate Aldrich reviewed the statements. The evidence is admissible. Continue. Cross turned back to Wren. Did the Duchess threaten you? She said if I didn't help her, she'd make sure I lost my position. And did you lose your position? Yes. Because you refused to continue lying for her? Objection! Holloway's voice was sharp, leading the witness. Sustained, Aldrich said. But the damage was done. Cross smiled. No further questions. Holloway stood for cross-examination, but Alara could see the panic in his eyes. Wren's testimony had gutted their defense before it even started. Mr. Wren, Holloway said carefully, you claim the Duchess paid you £500. Do you have any record of that transaction besides the bank statement? No. Did she give you cash, a check? A check. From which account? Wren hesitated. I don't remember. You don't remember receiving £500. It was weeks ago. But you remember the exact amount. Objection, Cross said lazily. Badgering. Sustained. Holloway switched tactics. Mr. Wren, who approached you about testifying today? No one. I came forward voluntarily. You expect this court to believe that you, a man who just lost his job and fled town, decided to come back and testify out of civic duty? Wren's jaw tightened. Yes. Did Lord Thorne or his representatives offer you anything in exchange for your testimony? No. Are you sure? Objection. Asked and answered. Sustained. Holloway sat down, frustrated. Alara wanted to scream. This was a setup, every word of it, and there was nothing they could do to prove it. Cross called his next witness, and the next, and the next. Each one told the same story. Alara had paid them, threatened them, manipulated them. By midday, the case against her looked airtight. During the recess, Alara and Holloway huddled in a small side room. They're lying, Alara said, all of them. I know, but we can't prove it. Holloway ran a hand through his hair. The bank statements, the testimony, it's all coordinated. The Thorns spent months setting this up. So what do? We put Adrian on the stand. He's our only credible witness. They'll tear him apart. Maybe. But it's all we've got. Alara closed her eyes. This was her fault. She'd pushed too hard, too fast, and now everyone around her was paying the price. There's one other option, Holloway said quietly. What? You testify. No. Alara, if I testify, Cross will destroy me. He'll twist everything I say, make me look desperate, delusional. You're already painted that way. At least if you testify, you get to tell your side. Alara shook her head. It's too risky. Everything's risky at this point. Before she could respond, there was a knock at the door. Mrs. Brennan stepped in, her face pale. Your Grace, you need to see this. She handed Alara a newspaper, the afternoon edition. The headline read, Duchess Ashford's past revealed. Debts, desperation, deception. The article detailed Alara's life before the marriage, but it wasn't the sympathetic portrait Margaret Hale had written. It was a hit piece painting her as a social climber who'd manipulated Rowan into marriage, who'd lived off her cousin's charity while plotting her rise. Every fact was twisted, every detail weaponized. They're not just trying to convict you in court, Holloway said quietly. They're convicting you in the press. Alara set the paper down, her hands shaking. This was it, the moment she'd been dreading. The Thorns weren't just attacking her case, they were attacking her entire existence, and she had no idea how to fight back. Adrian took the stand that afternoon. He looked better than he had in weeks, cleaned up, sober, his posture straight, but his eyes were haunted. Holloway approached him carefully. Mr. Ashford, you were engaged to Livia Thorne at the time of her death, correct? Yes. And you were present at Ashford Hall the night she died? Yes. Can you tell the court what you saw? Adrian took a breath. I saw Livia go out onto the balcony. I saw Celeste follow her. I heard them arguing, and then... His voice cracked. Then Livia fell. The courtroom was silent. Did you see what happened on the balcony? Holloway asked. No, but I know Livia was terrified. She'd been crying for days. She told me Celeste was pressuring her about the wedding, about money. She said Celeste was acting strange. Objection, Cross said. Hearsay. It goes to the witness's state of mind, Holloway argued. Overruled, Aldrich said. Continue. Adrian's hands gripped the armrests. After Livia fell, I found Celeste on the balcony. She was crying. She said Livia jumped, but I didn't believe her. Why not? Because Livia would never have gone near that balcony voluntarily. She was terrified of heights. His voice strengthened. Celeste lied. And I let her because I couldn't face the truth. Cross stood for cross-examination, his expression predatory. Mr. Ashford, you've struggled with alcohol dependency for years, haven't you? Adrian's jaw tightened. Yes. In fact, you were intoxicated the night Livia died. I'd been drinking, yes. So your memory of that night is compromised. No. But you admit you didn't see what happened on the balcony. I saw enough. Did you? Cross stepped closer. Or did you spend the last 5 years drunk and grieving, and now you're looking for someone to blame besides yourself? Objection, Holloway shouted. Withdrawn. Cross smiled. No further questions. Adrian left the stand looking shattered. Alara's heart broke for him. But worse, she knew Cross had won that round too. The prosecution rested its case at the end of the day. Magistrate Aldrich looked at Holloway. Does the defense wish to present witnesses? Holloway glanced at Alara. She shook her head slightly. What was the point? Every witness they had was either gone, discredited, or too afraid to testify. We call Duchess Alara Ashford, Holloway said. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Alara stood, her legs unsteady. She walked to the stand, placed her hand on the book, and swore to tell the truth. Holloway approached. Duchess Ashford, did you fabricate any evidence in the Thorne investigation? No. Did you pay or threaten any witnesses? No. Did you harass Lady Celeste Thorne? I confronted her. I asked her questions. I didn't harass her. Why did you investigate Livia Thorne's death? Alara met his gaze. Because my husband was being falsely accused, and because no one else seemed to care about finding the truth. And what truth did you find? That Livia Thorne didn't fall by accident, that her sister was on that balcony with her, and that powerful people covered it up to protect their reputation. Cross stood for cross-examination, his smile sharp. Duchess Ashford, you married Duke Rowan Ashford after knowing him for how long? 2 weeks. And what did you know about his past? He told me about Livia's death, about the accusations. And yet you married him anyway. Why? Because I believed he was innocent. Or because you saw an opportunity. Objection. Sustained. Cross didn't miss a beat. You had no money, no family, no prospects, and suddenly you're offered marriage to a duke. That must have seemed like a miracle. It seemed like a partnership that required you to defend your husband by any means necessary. I defended him with the truth, or with lies disguised as truth. Cross pulled out the bank statements. Can you explain these deposits into Thomas Wren's account? I can't, because I didn't make them. But they came from an account connected to Ashford Hall. Alara's breath caught. What? Cross smiled. The payments to Mr. Wren originated from an estate account that you had access to as Duchess. I never used that account. But you could have. You had the authority. Alara's mind spun. Someone had used the estate account. Someone with access. Someone inside Ashford Hall. I didn't make those payments, she said firmly. Then who did? I don't know, but someone is setting me up. How convenient. Cross turned to the magistrate. No further questions. Alara stepped down, her heart pounding. They had her. The evidence was circumstantial, but it was enough, and she had no way to prove her innocence. The closing arguments came the next morning. Cross painted Alara as a desperate woman who'd lied and manipulated her way into power. Holloway painted her as a victim of a conspiracy designed to silence the truth. The magistrate deliberated for 2 hours. When she returned, her expression was unreadable. The defendant will rise. Alara stood, her hands gripping the table. This court finds the evidence presented by the prosecution compelling but not conclusive, Aldrich said. However, given the serious nature of the charges and the credibility issues surrounding the defense's witnesses, I am remanding this case for further investigation. Alara's knees nearly buckled. During this investigation, Duchess Ashford will be placed under house arrest at Ashford Hall. She is prohibited from contacting witnesses, leaving the estate, or engaging in any activities related to the Thorne case. Violation of these terms will result in immediate imprisonment. The gavel came down. Alara barely heard the rest. House arrest, investigation. They'd boxed her in completely. As guards approached to escort her out, Rowan pushed through the crowd. Alara, I'm fine, she lied. We'll appeal. We'll find new evidence. There is no new evidence. They burned it all. She looked at him, her voice dropping. They won. Before he could respond, the guards led her away. Back at Ashford Hall, Alara stood in the study, staring at the summons still sitting on the desk. She'd fought. She'd risked everything, and she'd lost. The door opened. Mrs. Brennan entered, her expression grim. Your Grace, there's something you need to know. What now? The estate account, the one they said you used to pay the witnesses. Mrs. Brennan's voice was tight. I checked the ledgers. There were 2 transactions made that I didn't authorize, both on days when you were off the estate. Alara's pulse quickened. Who has access to that account besides me? Only 3 people. You, the Duke, and the steward. The steward. Alara's mind raced. Rowan's steward had been with the estate for years, loyal, trusted, or so they'd thought. "Where is he?" Alara asked. "He left this morning. Said he was visiting family in the south." Alara's blood went cold. The steward had sabotaged her. He'd made the payments, created the paper trail, and then disappeared before anyone could question him. The Thorns hadn't just bought witnesses, they'd bought someone inside Ashford Hall. And now he was gone. Alara stared at Mrs. Brennan, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. "How long has he been gone?" "Since dawn. Took a horse and a travel bag. Told the stable hand he'd be back in a week." Mrs. Brennan's hands twisted in her apron. "But he's not coming back, is he?" "No." Alara's voice was flat. "He's not." The steward's name was Richard Moss, mid-40s, balding, with the kind of forgettable face that made him perfect for betrayal. He'd managed Ashford Hall's finances for 6 years. He knew every account, every transaction, every vulnerability, and the Thorns had turned him. "We need to find him," Alara said. "Your Grace, you're under house arrest. If you leave, then I'll be imprisoned. But if I don't find Moss, I'll be convicted anyway." She moved to the desk, pulling out maps of the region. "Where does he have family?" "He always said the southern coast, but I never heard him mention specifics." Alara traced routes with her finger. The southern coast was vast. Dozens of towns, hundreds of places to hide. Finding one man would be nearly impossible, unless he wasn't actually going south. "Mrs. Brennan, did Moss ever mention friends? People he was close to?" "Not that I recall. He kept to himself mostly." "What about money? Did he have debts? Gambling problems?" "Not that I knew of. He was always very careful with his accounts." "Too careful." Alara's mind raced. A man who'd been bought by the Thorns wouldn't flee to some random southern town. He'd go somewhere he felt safe, somewhere he had protection, somewhere connected to the Thorns themselves. She turned to Mrs. Brennan. "Get me everything you can find on Moss. Letters, receipts, anything that might tell us where he'd go." "What are you going to do?" "Something stupid." Oh, Rowan found her an hour later in the library, surrounded by papers. "You can't be serious." Alara didn't look up. "I'm completely serious." "Alara, you're under house arrest. If the magistrate finds out you're planning to leave, she'll throw me in prison." "I know." She finally met his gaze. "But Moss is the key to everything. He made those payments. He created the false trail. If I can find him and get him to confess, we can prove the Thorns set me up. And if you can't find him, then I'm no worse off than I am now." Rowan moved around the table, his expression torn between frustration and fear. "You'll be worse off. You'll be a fugitive. I'm already being treated like a criminal. At least this way I'm fighting back." "By breaking the law?" "The law isn't protecting me, Rowan. The Thorns are using it as a weapon." She stood, facing him. "I'm not asking your permission. I'm telling you what I'm going to do." His jaw tightened. "You think I'm going to let you go alone?" "You have to. If you come with me, they'll arrest you too. Then we both lose." "I don't care." "I do." Her voice softened. "Someone needs to stay here. Keep the estate running. Make sure Adrian doesn't fall apart. And if I don't come back..." "Don't say that." "If I don't come back, you need to be here to protect what's left." Rowan's hands curled into fists. For a moment, she thought he'd argue further. Then he exhaled slowly. "How are you planning to find him?" "I'm not sure yet, but Mrs. Brennan found something." She handed him a ledger. 3 months ago, Moss made a withdrawal, £200, cash, no explanation in the records." "That's unusual." "Very. And it was right around the time the Thorns would have been planning their counterattack." She pointed to another entry. "Then here, a week before the trial, another withdrawal, same amount. Payments. Or insurance. Maybe Moss was afraid the Thorns would cut him loose, so he took money for himself." Rowan studied the ledger. "If he's running, he'll need more than £400 to disappear. Which means he'll need to access another account, somewhere the Thorns set up for him. How do we find that?" Alara pulled out another document, a letter Mrs. Brennan had found in Moss's quarters. It was brief, unsigned, written in careful script. Payment received, the rest upon completion. Completion of what? Rowan asked. My conviction. Alara set the letter down. This proves Moss was working for someone, and whoever sent this is expecting final payment. Could be anywhere. Could be. But look at the postmark. Rowan leaned closer. The stamp was faded but readable. Grayport, a coastal town. 2 days' ride south. That's not where he said he was going, Rowan said slowly. No. He said he had family in the south. But Grayport is east, on the coast. Alara met his eyes. I think that's where the Thorns set up his escape route, and that's where I'll find him. She left that night. Mrs. Brennan helped her prepare. Plain clothes, a hooded cloak, enough money for travel. Adrian insisted on coming, but Alara refused. He was still fragile, still recovering. She couldn't risk him. Rowan walked her to the stables. If you're not back in 3 days, I'm coming after you, he said. If I'm not back in 3 days, don't bother. It'll mean I failed. Alara, she turned to face him, her hand on the saddle. I need you to promise me something. What? If this goes wrong, if I'm arrested or worse, you don't try to rescue me. You protect yourself, you rebuild. That's not going to happen. Promise me. Rowan's expression was anguished. I can't. Why not? Because you're not just my partner anymore. His voice was rough. He stopped, struggling for words. You matter, to me, more than I expected, more than I know how to handle. Alara's breath caught. He stepped closer, his hand cupping her face. So, no, I'm not promising to let you go. If you fail, I fail with you. Then he kissed her. It wasn't gentle. It was desperate and fierce and full of everything they'd both been too afraid to say. When he pulled back, her hands were shaking. Come back, he said quietly. I'll try. She mounted the horse and rode into the darkness before she could change her mind. Grayport was exactly as miserable as its reputation suggested. Gray buildings, gray sky, gray water stretching to the horizon. The town smelled like fish and salt and desperation. Alara arrived at midday, exhausted and saddle-sore, her hood pulled low. She started at the docks, asking quiet questions. Had anyone seen a man matching Moss's description? Balding, mid-40s, traveling alone? Most people ignored her. A few demanded money for information. One dock worker finally pointed her toward a boarding house near the harbor. Saw a fellow like that yesterday, nervous type. Paid for a room in cash. Alara slipped him a coin and headed for the boarding house. It was a 3-story structure that looked like it might collapse in a strong wind. The landlady was a thin woman with suspicious eyes and a voice like gravel. Looking for someone? The landlady asked. My uncle, Richard Moss. I heard he might be staying here. The landlady's eyes narrowed. Don't know anyone by that name. Are you sure? He's balding, about this tall. I said, I don't know him. Alara pulled out more coins. The landlady's expression softened. Room 7, upstairs. But if you're causing trouble, you're out. No trouble. Alara climbed the creaking stairs, her heart hammering. Room 7 was at the end of the hall. She pressed her ear to the door. Movement inside. Someone pacing. She knocked. The movement stopped. Who is it? A man's voice, Moss's voice. Delivery, Alara said, pitching her voice lower. Silence. Then footsteps approaching. The door cracked open. Alara shoved it hard, knocking Moss backward. She slipped inside and locked the door behind her. Moss stumbled, his face going pale. Duchess Ashford, sit down. I don't... Sit down. He sat on the narrow bed, his hands trembling. How did you find me? Does it matter? Alara stood over him, her voice cold. You sabotaged me. You made those payments to the witnesses. You created the evidence the Thorns used to frame me. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You don't understand. They threatened my family, said if I didn't help them, they'd ruin my sister. She has children, debts. So you ruined me instead. Moss's head dropped. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. Alara pulled out a small notebook. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to write down everything. Who approached you, how much they paid, what they told you to do, and then you're going to testify. They'll kill me. Maybe. But if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did. Your sister, your family, everyone. You'll never work again, never be trusted again. Her voice was ice. Choose. Moss looked at her, his eyes red. Then he reached for the notebook. He wrote for 20 minutes, his hand shaking. When he finished, he handed it back. It was Lord Thorne's lawyer, Vincent Cross. He approached me 6 months ago. Said if I helped them, they'd pay me £5,000 and relocate me abroad. If I refused, they'd destroy my sister. Alara scanned the confession. It was detailed, damning, perfect. Now you're going to come back with me to Ashford Hall, she said. I can't. You will, because this confession won't mean anything unless you testify in person. Moss's face crumpled. They'll kill me. Then I'll make sure you're protected, but you're coming with me. Now, Shad. They traveled through the night, avoiding main roads. Moss was sullen and terrified, jumping at every sound. Alara kept a knife within reach, not entirely sure she trusted him not to run. By dawn, they were halfway to Ashford Hall. That's when they were ambushed. 3 men on horseback blocked the road ahead, armed, professional. Alara's blood went cold. Keep riding, she hissed to Moss. But one of the men raised a crossbow. Stop, or I shoot. Alara reined in her horse. Beside her, Moss looked ready to faint. The leader of the group, a scarred man with cold eyes, rode closer. Duchess Ashford, you're a hard woman to find. Who sent you? Does it matter? The Thorns. The man smiled. Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, you're coming with us. And if I refuse? Then we take you by force. Your choice. Alara's mind raced. She was unarmed except for the knife. Moss was useless. The men looked capable of killing without hesitation. But if she let them take her, the confession would disappear. Moss would disappear. And the Thorns would win. All right, she said slowly. I'll come quietly. The man's smile widened. Smart. Alara dismounted, her hands raised. As the man moved to bind her wrists, she drove her knee into his groin. He doubled over with a grunt. She grabbed the crossbow from his hands and spun, firing at the second man. The bolt caught him in the shoulder. He screamed, toppling from his horse. The third man drew his sword. Alara threw the crossbow at him and ran, grabbing Moss by the arm. Move! They sprinted into the trees, branches whipping at their faces. Behind them, she heard shouting, hoofbeats. We're going to die, Moss gasped. Shut up and run. They crashed through the underbrush, lungs burning. Alara could hear the men closing in. Then, voices, different voices. Stop! Alara skidded to a halt. A group of riders emerged from the opposite direction. In front was Adrian Ashford, his face grim, flanked by 6 armed men. Adrian? Alara's voice was breathless. He looked past her at the pursuing men. Get behind me! The Thorns men hesitated, seeing they were outnumbered. Adrian's voice was cold. Leave, now, or I'll make sure your employer hears how you failed. The scarred man spat on the ground but turned his horse. This isn't over. Yes, Adrian said quietly. It is. The men rode away. Alara's knees nearly gave out. Adrian dismounted, steadying her. How did you know where to find me? She asked. I followed you, stayed a day behind in case you needed help. He glanced at Moss. Is this him? Yes. Then let's get him to the magistrate before anyone else tries to kill us. They arrived at Ashford Hall by nightfall. Rowan was waiting in the courtyard. When he saw Alara, his relief was almost physical. You're alive. Barely. He pulled her into a fierce embrace. Don't ever do that again. Can't promise that. He laughed, an exhausted, desperate sound. Then he saw Moss. Is that the steward? And he's confessed everything. Rowan's expression hardened. Good, because Magistrate Aldrich is inside. She came looking for you. Said if you didn't return by tonight, she'd issue a warrant. Alara's stomach dropped. Then we need to move fast. They brought Moss to the study, where Magistrate Aldrich sat with her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Duchess Ashford, you were ordered to remain on the estate. I know. And yet you left, pursued a witness, engaged in potentially dangerous activities. Aldrich's voice was severe. Give me one reason I shouldn't have you arrested right now. Alara pulled out Moss's confession and set it on the desk. Because I have proof that I was framed. Aldrich picked up the document, reading slowly. Her expression shifted, surprise, then anger. This is a confession from your own steward. Yes. He was paid by Vincent Cross to create the false evidence against me. He made the payments to the witnesses using estate accounts I didn't know about. Then he fled when the trial started. Aldrich looked at Moss. Is this true? Moss nodded miserably. All of it? And you're willing to testify? He glanced at Alara. Yes. Aldrich set the confession down, her jaw tight. This is damning, but it's also highly irregular. The defense pursuing and apprehending a witness on their own. I did what the court wouldn't, Alara said. You remanded the case for investigation. I investigated, and I found the truth. You violated your house arrest. I did, and if you want to punish me for that, fine. But read that confession first, and tell me if you still think I'm the criminal here. Aldrich was silent for a long moment. Then she stood. I'll need to verify this. Interview Mr. Moss independently. Review the estate accounts. Take all the time you need. But, Aldrich continued, her voice softer, if this confession is accurate, then the charges against you were fraudulent, which means the Thorns attempted to corrupt the court. Yes. Aldrich's expression turned cold. I don't take kindly to being manipulated, Duchess. If Vincent Cross and Lord Thorn conspired to frame you, they'll answer for it. Relief flooded through Alara. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is far from over. Aldrich gestured to her guards. Take Mr. Moss into protective custody. I want him somewhere the Thorns can't reach him. The guards led Moss away. He looked terrified but resigned. Aldrich turned to Alara. You took an incredible risk coming back here. I didn't have a choice. You always have a choice. You chose to fight. Aldrich's voice was almost approving. Most people in your position would have run or collapsed, but you didn't. I couldn't afford to. Neither could your husband, it seems. Aldrich glanced at Rowan. You married a dangerous woman, Duke Ashford. Rowan smiled faintly. I'm learning that. Aldrich gathered her papers. I'll reconvene the trial in 3 days. Until then, Duchess, you're still under house arrest. But, she paused at the door. Unofficially, I suggest you prepare a countersuit. If the Thorns tried to destroy you, you have grounds to go after them. The door closed behind her. Alara sank into a chair, her body finally giving in to exhaustion. Rowan knelt beside her. You did it. Not yet. Moss still has to testify. Aldrich still has to verify everything. The Thorns could still... Alara. His hands covered hers. You did it. You proved you were framed. The rest is just details. She wanted to believe him, but she'd learned not to count victories before they were won. Still, for the first time in weeks, she felt something close to hope. News of Moss's confession spread fast. By the next morning, the Highland Observer ran another article by Margaret Hale. Thorn. Conspiracy exposed. Steward confesses to framing Duchess. The article detailed everything. Moss's payments, the false evidence, Vincent Cross's involvement. It painted the Thorns not as victims, but as schemers who'd used grief as a weapon. Public opinion shifted overnight. Letters poured in. Some from nobles expressing outrage at the Thorns' tactics, others from common people who'd followed the case and now demanded justice. A petition started circulating, calling for a full investigation into the Thorn family's activities. Lord Thorn issued a statement denying everything. But his denials sounded hollow, and Celeste remained silent. 3 days later, the trial reconvened. The courtroom was even more packed than before, but this time the atmosphere was different. People weren't here to watch Alara be condemned. They were here to watch the truth unfold. Magistrate Aldrich called the court to order. After reviewing new evidence and testimony from Mr. Richard Moss, This court has determined that the charges against Duchess Alara Ashford were brought under false pretenses. The evidence presented by the prosecution was fabricated through conspiracy between Mr. Moss, Mr. Vincent Cross, and potentially others. The courtroom erupted. Aldrich banged her gavel. Order! The noise subsided. Accordingly, all charges against Duchess Ashford are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, I am referring this matter to the High Council for Criminal Investigation into the conduct of Vincent Cross and Lord Thorne. Alara's hands trembled. Dismissed. She was free. Aldrich continued. Mr. Cross, you are ordered to surrender your license to practice law pending investigation. Lord Thorne, you are ordered to appear before the High Council within 1 week to answer questions regarding your role in this conspiracy. Cross shot to his feet, his face red. This is an outrage. This is justice, Aldrich said coldly. And if you continue to disrupt these proceedings, I'll have you removed. Cross sat down, seething. Aldrich looked at Alara. Duchess Ashford, this court apologizes for the injustice you've suffered. While it cannot undo the harm caused, it can ensure those responsible are held accountable. Alara stood, her voice steady. Thank you, Magistrate. The gavel came down. It was over, yet. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. Some cheered when Alara emerged. Others watched silently, still processing what had happened. Margaret Hale pushed through with her notebook. Duchess Ashford, how do you feel? Exhausted, Alara said honestly, but relieved. What's next for you? Going home, rebuilding, living. And the Thorns? Alara met Hale's gaze. That's for the council to decide. I've said my piece. She moved past the journalist toward the carriage where Rowan waited. He helped her inside, his hand lingering on hers. Ready to go home? He asked. More than ready. As the carriage pulled away, Alara looked back at the courthouse, at the crowd, at the city that had tried to break her. She'd survived. More than that, she'd won. Not perfectly, not without scars, but she'd won. And that was enough. Back at Ashford Hall, the staff greeted them with cautious smiles. Mrs. Brennan had tears in her eyes. We heard the news, Your Grace. We're so glad you're home. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. Adrian met them in the hall. He looked sober, steady. You did it, he said quietly. We did it, Alara corrected. You testified when it mattered. That took courage. I owed it to Livia, and to you. He hesitated. I'm leaving soon. Going to the coast for a while, clear my head. That's probably wise. But I wanted to say thank you for not giving up. On Rowan. On me. On the truth. He embraced her briefly, then left. Rowan watched him go, his expression thoughtful. He's going to be all right. I hope so. They moved to the study where papers still covered the desk. Evidence, letters, records, the remnants of a war. Alara began organizing them, her movements automatic. Rowan caught her hand. Leave it. It needs to be filed. It needs to wait. He pulled her closer. You've been fighting for weeks, months. You're allowed to rest. I don't know how. Then I'll teach you. He led her to the window where the sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson. They stood there in silence, his arm around her shoulders, her head against his chest. I was terrified, he said finally. When you left, when I heard about the ambush, when I thought I might lose you. But you didn't. No, because you're impossible to kill, apparently. She smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. It is. He turned her to face him. Alara, I need to tell you something. What? I love you. The words hung between them. You don't have to say it back, he continued quickly. I know this started as a contract, a partnership, but somewhere along the way it became more, at least for me. And I needed you to know. Alara's throat tightened. You don't have to. I love you too. His breath caught. I didn't expect to, she said. I didn't think I was capable of it. But you made me believe I mattered, that I was worth fighting for. And somewhere in all of this, the chaos, the danger, the fighting, I fell in love with you. He kissed her then. Soft and certain and full of promises neither of them had thought they'd be able to keep. When they pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now," Alara said, "we rebuild. Together. As partners. As partners. And maybe," she smiled, "as something more." He laughed, pulling her close. "I can live with that." Outside, the first stars appeared. The world kept turning. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the future didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like home. "Send riders to every coaching station between here and the southern border," Alara said, her voice cutting through the stunned silence in the study. "I want to know every route the steward could have taken, every inn he might have stopped at, every—" "You're under house arrest," Rowan interrupted. His face was drawn tight, anger and fear warring in his expression. "You can't give orders. You can't leave the estate. If the magistrate finds out, the magistrate can go to hell." Mrs. Brennan made a small sound, something between shock and approval. Alara turned to her. "How much lead time does he have?" 6 hours, maybe 7. "Then he's not far. Not yet." Alara's mind was already 3 steps ahead, calculating distances and possibilities. "He'll avoid the main roads, too many witnesses. He'll take the back routes through the highlands." "There are dozens of those routes," Rowan said. "We can't search them all." "We don't have to search them all. We just have to think like a man who's running scared." Alara moved to the map mounted on the wall, tracing her finger along the territory. "He knows this estate. He knows our patrols, our schedules, our weak points. Where would he feel safest?" Mrs. Brennan stepped forward, squinting at the map. "The old Shepherd's Road. It runs along the ridge above Thornvale. Barely used anymore except during summer grazing. Perfect for someone who wants to disappear." Alara looked at Rowan. "We need horses. Now." "You can't go," he said flatly. "Watch me." "Alara, if you violate the terms of your house arrest, they'll throw you in prison. No trial, no appeal. You'll be done." "I'm already done if we don't find him." She met his gaze, her voice dropping. "The steward is the only proof that I didn't pay those witnesses. If he disappears, I'm convicted. And everything we've fought for dies with my reputation." Rowan's jaw worked. "Then I'll go." "No." "Why not?" "Because if this goes wrong, you can claim you didn't know I left. You can distance yourself, protect the estate." Alara's hands curled into fists. "But if you go with me, we both burn." "I don't care." "I do." They stared at each other, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down between them. Finally, Mrs. Brennan cleared her throat. "Forgive me, Your Grace, but you're both being idiots." Alara blinked. "Excuse me?" "You need each other. The Duchess can't track a man through the Highlands alone. She doesn't know the terrain well enough. And the Duke can't bring the steward back without credible testimony about what happened inside this house." Mrs. Brennan's expression was stern. "So stop arguing and start working together, like you've been doing since this whole mess began." Silence. Then Rowan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "She's right." "I know," Alara said quietly. "But if we do this, if we leave together, we're committing to it completely. No backing out, no second guessing." "I haven't backed out yet." Something shifted in his expression. "No, you haven't." Mrs. Brennan moved to the door. "I'll have the stable boy prepare 2 horses, quietly, and I'll tell anyone who asks that you're both indisposed for the evening." "Thank you," Alara said. The housekeeper paused at the threshold. "Bring him back, Your Grace, alive if possible, but bring him back." They rode out just before dusk, taking the narrow path that wound up through the forested slopes above Ashford Hall. The air was cold and sharp, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Rowan led the way, his posture tense in the saddle. Alara followed, her cloak pulled tight against the wind. Neither of them spoke. There wasn't much to say that hadn't already been said a dozen different ways over the past weeks. The Shepherd's Road appeared after an hour of climbing, little more than a dirt track worn into the hillside, barely wide enough for a single horse. Deep ruts marked the path where cartwheels had cut through mud during past seasons. Rowan dismounted, crouching to examine the ground. Fresh tracks within the last few hours. 1 horse? Yes, moving fast. He stood, his expression grim. He knows we'd come after him. Then we need to move faster. They remounted and pushed forward, the horses picking their way carefully over loose stones and exposed roots. The sun dropped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of bruised purple and dying orange. "Why did he do it?" Alara asked suddenly. "The steward. He'd worked for your family for years. Why betray you now?" Rowan's shoulders tightened. "Money, probably. The Thorns have enough of it, and they're not above buying loyalty when they can't command it." "It wasn't just money." Alara's voice was thoughtful. "It was opportunity. He saw what was happening, the investigation, the pressure from the Thorns, the vulnerability, and he chose the winning side. Except we're not losing yet. We are if we don't catch him." The truth of that settled between them like a stone. They rode in silence for another hour. The moon rose, casting pale light across the landscape. And then, in the distance, Alara saw it, a flicker of orange against the darkness, a campfire. Rowan saw it too. He raised a hand, signaling a halt. "Could be shepherds," he murmured, "or it could be him." They dismounted, tying the horses to a low-hanging branch, and moved forward on foot. The ground was treacherous here, all loose scree and hidden dips. Alara's boots slipped twice before she found her rhythm. As they drew closer, voices carried on the wind. Two men. One was the steward. Alara recognized his reedy tenor. The other was unfamiliar, deeper, rougher. Rowan touched her shoulder, gesturing for her to stay low. They crept to the edge of the firelight, crouching behind a cluster of rocks. The steward sat on a fallen log, his traveling cloak muddy and torn. Across from him sat a man Alara didn't recognize, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down the left side of his face. "Don't care what you promised," the scarred man was saying. "I want the rest of my payment now." "I told you I'll have it when I reach the coast," the steward said nervously. "Lord Thorn's agent will meet me there with the full amount. And I'm supposed to trust that? After what happened to the last man who worked for the Thorns?" The steward's face paled. "What are you talking about?" "The clerk, Wren. He testified like they wanted, and 2 days later he's found dead in a ditch outside town. Accident, they said." The scarred man leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Funny kind of accident." Alara's breath stopped. Thomas Wren was dead. The Thorns had killed him. Beside her, Rowan's hand clenched into a fist. The scarred man continued, "So you'll forgive me if I don't want to wait around for my money, especially since your employers seem to have a habit of tying up loose ends." "I'm not a loose end," the steward protested. "I did exactly what they asked. I transferred the funds, created the paper trail, and now the Duchess is under house arrest and you're running like a rabbit. That makes you a liability." The steward stood abruptly. "I've done everything Lord Thorn wanted. He gave me his word." "His word." The scarred man laughed. "You really are an idiot." He stood too, one hand moving to the knife at his belt. The steward backed away. "Wait, we can—" Rowan stepped into the firelight, his voice cutting through the night like a blade. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Both men froze. The scarred man's hand stayed on his knife. "Who the hell are you?" "Duke Rowan Ashford, and that man you're about to kill? I need him alive." The scarred man's eyes narrowed. "You're the one they framed. I'm the one they tried to frame. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm standing." "Then let me clarify." Rowan's voice was cold. "You can walk away now with your life. Or you can draw that knife and find out what happens when you threaten someone under my protection." The scarred man glanced at the steward, then back at Rowan. "He's not worth dying over." "Smart man." The scarred man released his knife, raised his hands, and backed away into the darkness. Moments later, Alara heard hoofbeats retreating down the trail. The steward stood trembling by the fire, his face pale and slick with sweat. "Your Grace, I can explain—" "Save it." Rowan's expression was ice. "You're coming back with us. And you're going to tell the magistrate exactly what the Thorns paid you to do." "They'll kill me." "They'll kill you anyway. We just heard that conversation." Rowan stepped closer. "But if you cooperate, if you testify, I'll make sure you're protected. You'll live long enough to regret betraying me, which is more than you deserve." The steward's knees buckled. He sank onto the log, his head in his hands. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has a choice. You don't understand. Lord Thorne, he knew things about my past, things that could ruin me. So you ruined someone else instead. The steward looked up, his eyes red. I'm sorry. Tell it to the court. They brought him back to Ashford Hall just before dawn, his hands bound, his spirit broken. Mrs. Brennan met them at the servants' entrance, her expression tight with relief. Thank heavens, I was beginning to think… She stopped, seeing the steward. Is he cooperating? He will be, Rowan said grimly. Lock him in the cellar, post 2 guards. No one sees him except us. Mrs. Brennan nodded and led the steward away. Alara swayed where she stood, exhaustion crashing over her in waves. She'd been running on fear and fury for so long that now, with the immediate danger past, her body was demanding payment. Rowan caught her elbow. You need rest. I need the magistrate. The magistrate can wait a few hours. You're dead on your feet. I'm fine. You're not. And I'm not letting you collapse before we finish this. His voice softened. Please, Alara, just a few hours. She wanted to argue, but the truth was she could barely keep her eyes open. Fine. A few hours. He walked her to her chambers, his hand steady on her back. At the door, he paused. You were right, he said quietly. About going after him, about all of it. We haven't won yet. No, but we will. Alara looked at him, really looked at him. The exhaustion in his face, the determination in his eyes, the way he'd stood beside her through every impossible moment. Thank you, she said, for coming with me, for trusting me. I should be thanking you. You fought harder for my name than I ever did. It's my name too now. Something shifted in his expression. Yes, it is. He left before she could say anything else. Oh. Alara slept for 3 hours and woke with sunlight streaming through the window and a plan crystallizing in her mind. The steward's testimony would exonerate her, but it wouldn't be enough to bring down the Thornes. Not completely. They'd claim he was lying to save himself. They'd discredit him the same way they'd discredited everyone else, unless she gave them something they couldn't discredit. She found Rowan in the study, already drafting a message to Magistrate Aldrich. Don't send that yet, she said. He looked up. Why not? Because I want to do this differently. I want to call a public hearing. Alara, but listen, if we bring this to the magistrate privately, the Thornes will fight it behind closed doors. They'll pressure her to suppress the testimony, delay the proceedings, bury it in legal maneuvering. Alara moved to the desk, her hands flat on the wood. But if we make it public, if we invite the press, the nobles, everyone who's been watching this case, they can't hide. They'll have to answer for what they've done. Rowan frowned. That's a massive risk. If something goes wrong, if the steward changes his story, he won't. We have him. We have the truth. And we have nothing left to lose. We have everything to lose. No, we have everything to gain. Alara's voice was steady. The Thornes have controlled this narrative from the beginning. They've decided what people believe, what evidence matters, who gets to speak. I'm tired of playing by their rules, so let's change the game. Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he smiled. You're terrifying when you're determined. I'll take that as a compliment. It was. He stood, moving around the desk to stand beside her. All right. We'll call a public hearing, but we do it right, full transparency, every piece of evidence, every witness, no surprises. Agreed. And if this fails, if they find a way to twist it, we leave, both of us. We take what we can carry, and we disappear before they can throw us in prison. Alara considered that, then she nodded. Deal. They shook hands. It felt like signing a treaty, or a death warrant. The public hearing was set for 3 days later in the main council chamber. Word spread fast. By the second day, half the Highland nobility had sent word they'd be attending. Margaret Hale printed a front-page article calling it the trial of the century. The council chamber had to expand seating to accommodate the crowd. Alara spent those 3 days preparing. She went over the steward's testimony a dozen times, making sure every detail was airtight. She reviewed the financial records, the witness statements, the timeline of events. She anticipated every possible objection, every counterargument, every trap the Thorns might set. And on the morning of the hearing, she dressed in the plainest gown she owned. Simple gray wool, no jewelry, no ornamentation. She wanted to be seen as exactly what she was, a woman with nothing to hide. Rowan met her at the door, dressed equally simply in black. "Ready?" he asked. "No, but I'm going anyway." He took her hand. "Then let's finish this." The council chamber was packed. Every seat was filled, and people lined the walls 3 deep. Alara recognized faces from the first trial. Nobles who'd watched her get torn apart, journalists who'd printed lies about her, onlookers who'd come for the spectacle. Lord Thorne sat at the front, flanked by his lawyers. Vincent Cross looked as confident as ever. But Thorne himself looked older, grayer, like the weight of his own lies was finally catching up to him. Celeste wasn't there. Again. Magistrate Aldrich entered and the room fell silent. "This hearing has been called at the request of Duchess Ashford," Aldrich announced. "The purpose is to present new evidence in the matter of the charges against her." "Duchess, you may proceed." Alara stood. "Thank you, Your Honor. I call my first witness. Marcus Trent, former steward of Ashford Hall." The guards brought Trent in. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by guilt and fear. He took the stand without looking at anyone. James Holloway conducted the questioning. "Mr. Trent, were you employed by Duke Ashford as his steward?" "Yes." "And during that employment, did you have access to the estate financial accounts?" "Yes." "Did you use those accounts to make payments to witnesses in the Thorne investigation?" Trent's voice was barely a whisper. "Yes." "Who instructed you to make those payments?" "Lord Thorne's representative, a man named Gregor Voss." The room erupted in whispers. Cross shot to his feet. "Objection. This witness is clearly lying to save himself from criminal prosecution." "He's under oath," Holloway said calmly, "and we have corroborating evidence." He presented the bank records, the real ones, showing the transactions that matched Trent's testimony. He presented letters between Trent and Voss outlining the plan to frame Alara. He presented a signed confession from Trent detailing everything he'd done. The evidence was damning. Lord Thorne's face went white. Cross scrambled for a response. "These documents could be fabricated." "They're not," Trent said suddenly. His voice was stronger now, steadier. "Everything in those letters is true. I was paid to transfer funds, to create a paper trail pointing to the Duchess, and when I tried to back out, they threatened to expose crimes from my past." "What crimes?" Aldrich asked. "Embezzlement. From a previous employer. I was never caught, but Voss knew. He said if I didn't cooperate, he'd make sure I was prosecuted." "So you framed an innocent woman instead?" Trent's head dropped. "Yes." Holloway let that sit for a moment. Then he said, "Did Lord Thorne or Lady Celeste know about this plan?" "I don't know about Lady Celeste, but Lord Thorne approved every step. Voss reported directly to him." The chamber exploded. Aldrich banged her gavel. "Order! Order in this chamber!" It took several minutes for the noise to die down. Cross stood again, his composure cracking. "Your Honor, this testimony is clearly coerced." "Is it?" Alara's voice cut through the room. Everyone turned. She stood, her expression calm. "Because I have another witness who can corroborate Mr. Trent's story." "Who?" Aldrich asked. "Gregor Voss himself." The doors at the back of the chamber opened. A man walked in, the scarred man from the campfire. He moved to the front of the room, ignoring the stares and whispers. "Mr. Voss," Alara said, "would you tell the court who employed you?" Voss looked at Lord Thorne. Then he said, "Lord Edmund Thorne. I worked for him for 5 years, doing jobs he didn't want traced back to his family." "What kind of jobs?" "Intimidation, bribery, occasionally worse." "Did Lord Thorne instruct you to frame Duchess Ashford?" "Yes. He said she was getting too close to the truth about his daughter. He wanted her discredited before she could expose what really happened." "And what really happened?" Voss hesitated. "That's not my story to tell." "Then whose story is it?" Another voice spoke from the back of the room. "It's mine." Alara's heart stopped. Celeste Thorne walked down the center aisle, her head high, her expression unreadable. The crowd parted for her like water. She reached the front and turned to face the magistrate. "I'd like to testify." So Celeste took the stand. She looked different from the last time Alara had seen her, thinner, paler, like something inside her had broken and never quite healed. Aldrich studied her. "Lady Thorne, you understand you're under oath?" "I do." "Proceed." Celeste took a breath. "Livia didn't fall. I pushed her." The silence was absolute. "She was going to call off the wedding," Celeste continued, her voice hollow. "She'd discovered our father's debts. She knew the marriage was just a financial transaction, and she couldn't go through with it. She said she'd rather live in poverty than be sold like livestock." Her hands trembled. "I told her she was being selfish, that she didn't understand what was at stake. We argued. She said she was leaving, that she'd tell everyone the truth about our family's finances, and She stopped, her eyes closing. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to stop her from leaving. I grabbed her arm, she pulled away, and she fell." Tears streamed down her face. "I should have called for help. I should have told the truth, but I was terrified. So I lied. I said she jumped, and my father, he believed me. Or he pretended to, and then everything spiraled." She looked at Alara. "You were right about all of it, the balcony, the wine glasses, everything, and I hated you for it, so I let my father destroy you rather than face what I'd done." She turned back to Aldrich. "I'm ready to accept whatever punishment the court decides." The room was silent. Then Lord Thorne stood. "Celeste, don't—" "Sit down, father." Her voice was steel. "I'm done lying for you." Thorne's face crumpled. He sank back into his chair like a man who'd just watched his entire world collapse. Aldrich banged her gavel. "This court will recess for 1 hour while I review this testimony." Oh. The hour felt like an eternity. Alara stood outside the chamber with Rowan, neither of them speaking. There was too much to say and no words adequate to hold it. Finally, Holloway found them. "The magistrate's ready." They filed back into the chamber. Aldrich looked exhausted. "This court has reviewed the testimony and evidence presented today. The charges against Duchess Alara Ashford are hereby dismissed with prejudice. The original ruling regarding the death of Livia Thorne is overturned. Lady Celeste Thorne will face charges of manslaughter and obstruction of justice. Lord Edmund Thorne will face charges of conspiracy, witness tampering, and accessory after the fact." She paused. "And I want to personally apologize to Duchess Ashford. You were subjected to a grave miscarriage of justice, and this court failed you. I hope this ruling brings some measure of vindication." Alara's knees went weak. It was over. They'd won. Yeah. The aftermath was chaos. Reporters swarmed. Nobles demanded statements. The Thornes were led away in chains. Alara barely registered any of it. She found herself outside the chamber, breathing fresh air for the first time in what felt like years. Rowan appeared beside her. "You did it. We did it. No, this was you. All of it." He turned to face her fully. "I hired you to manage a household. You saved my life instead. I just asked questions. You did more than that. You refused to accept the world as it was. You demanded better. You fought when everyone told you to surrender." His voice softened. "You changed everything." Alara looked at him. "What happens now?" "Now? We go home. We rebuild. We figure out what a real partnership looks like." "That sounds terrifying." "Probably, but I think we can handle it." Alara smiled. For the first time in months, it felt genuine. "Yeah, I think we can." Did. 6 months later, Alara stood in the gardens of Ashford Hall, watching the sun set over the highlands. The estate had changed. They'd dismissed the remaining staff who'd proven disloyal and hired new people who earned their positions through competence, not connections. They'd opened the books on the estate finances, making everything transparent. They'd started hosting monthly gatherings where locals could bring grievances directly to the Duke and Duchess. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was better. Rowan found her by the roses, 2 glasses of wine in his hands. He offered her one. "Mrs. Brennan says the harvest looks good this year," he said. "She's been saying that for weeks. I think she's just happy things are calm." "Can you blame her?" Alara laughed. No. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the colors bleed across the sky. Adrian's getting married, Rowan said suddenly. That surprised her. To who? Margaret Hale. Alara nearly choked on her wine. The journalist? Apparently they started talking after the trial. She interviewed him for a follow-up story and Rowan shrugged. He says she's the first person who sees him as more than his grief. That's good. He deserves that. So do you. Alara looked at him. What do you mean? Rowan set down his glass, turning to face her fully. I know this started as a contract, a strategic arrangement, but somewhere along the way it became something else, at least for me. Her heart stuttered. Rowan, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just want you to know, you're not just my partner, you're… He stopped, searching for words. You're the person I trust most in the world, the person I want beside me, not because of duty or necessity, but because I can't imagine this life without you in it. Alara's throat tightened. I feel the same way. Yeah? Yeah. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile that transformed his entire face. Good. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. The gesture was simple, almost casual, but it felt like everything. So what now? Alara asked. Now we keep going. Together. That sounds perfect. And for the first time in her life, Alara believed it. She'd spent 26 years being invisible, being overlooked, being told she didn't matter. But she'd fought her way into a life that did matter, into a partnership built on trust and respect, and something that felt an awful lot like love. She wasn't invisible anymore, and she never would be again. The sun dropped below the horizon, painting the world in shades of gold and purple. Rowan squeezed her hand, Alara squeezed back, and together they walked into the future they'd built, one impossible choice at a time.